It is a pleasure to welcome two distinguished correspondents today to the IE School of Communication at IE University. Leila Fadel is the Baghdad bureau chief of the Washington Post, and Ben Lando is the founder, as well as Baghdad bureau chief of the Iraq Oil Report, an innovative publication that's based online. I'll start the first question to Leila. I was wondering if you could tell us what motivated you to begin covering Iraq?
For me, it was about accountability, about making sure that what was being said in Washington and out of the green zone was the truth. So the only way to do that is to go to the streets of Iraq and shine a light on what's happening there. This is a country where billions of dollars have been spent and thousands of American lives have been lost, but also tens of thousands and by some accounts hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives. So it's very important to cover.
Okay. And Ben?
I came because after covering stories about oil and energy in a number of countries around the world, Iraq struck me as a country that perhaps most needed a watchdog to look at the oil, because they have so much oil and it's been used in the past to not to benefit the people, whether it's foreign oil companies or their own government or foreign governments. And I think it was important to have somebody to keep an eye on that and that perspective.
And I was wondering if you both could tell us what are the obstacles, impediments, dangers of serving as correspondents in Iraq?
Well, Iraq is, I think, has sort of changed the way journalists work, because during this war, in most conflicts, people understood the role of a journalist as an observer, as somebody who is supposed to be your way to get your voice out there. But in Iraq, a lot of us became targets. And most recently, where we live was bombed, and a group in Iraq, a Sunni militant group, said we were legitimate targets. And so much of what we do is also about protecting ourselves to make sure we can continue doing it, but not protecting ourselves so much that we cannot talk to people and tell the stories that they deserve to be told.
Mm-hmm. And it makes it difficult to get around the city, get around Baghdad, as well as throughout the country. You have to do so much logistical planning to make sure that the place you're going to is safe, that you can get there in time. You have to leave early enough that you can get through the traffic jams. And also dealing with officials. I mean, it's very difficult because the officials don't want to talk to you, or they don't want, what they really want said. They can't express that to a journalist. And those are some of the biggest obstacles, and all related to security.
Yeah, security obstacles.
Is there one particular story that you covered that affects you? You could say your most important story or the most touching story you covered?
Well, I mean, for me, the stories I write that are solely about people's lives are the ones that touch me the most. I mean, I cover everything, politics, military, social. There is one story, and it's not the most important story in the world, but it was about a little boy who was born on the day of the invasion. And as the family heard the first explosions, he had his first cries, and they called him, the Arabic word for war, means harib. And what touched me about that story was this little boy turned 6 on the day that I had written the story about him. And in those 6 years, he knew nothing but war. He's a child that could talk to me about the dead men on the street. He'd been through 2 or 3 bombings. And he's 6 playing Grand Theft Auto. Blood doesn't bother him because his whole life he's known fear and war.
Ben?
It's different for me because I cover, sometimes it becomes abstract, oil, very few people see it, but they benefit from it. And so going to be able to some crumbling piece of infrastructure where millions of dollars a day are being, rushed to market, that's big for me. But in terms of a story that's touched me the most was covering the most recent bombings of the hotels. I mean, I actually witnessed much of the gunfight beforehand, and I was 40 meters away from it, from when the bomb exploded, and I was able to write a first-person story about that, and I think maybe it's because it's so recent or because of how devastating it was, but that was probably had the biggest impact on me so far.
I think every story you cover, a piece of you is touched, and it contributes to how you cover the story in the future, too.
What would you say to a public that's seeming to lose interest in the news coming out of Iraq? I mean, focusing now on Afghanistan, for example, has kind of shifted the attention away from Iraq. What could you say to the public? Why does Iraq still matter?
Well, I actually think these next 2 years are possibly the most important of this American invasion experiment, because now that the U.S. has signed an agreement that says they have to leave, and Iraq is coming into its sovereignty, now you see what kind of country this will become. The U.S.-led coalition invaded with expressed how they wanted this to be democratic and better for the Iraqi people. Now we get to measure that in these next 2 years. The problem is a lot of the interest is gone because the administration no longer cares about it, and it's all focused on Afghanistan. So you have to become creative about how you tell these stories and how you cast them to show why they're important to an American audience, which is what I write for. And that importance is the accountability issue again. These 2 years will show what was done here.
And what the future holds for Iraqis. Will they finally prosper? Will they be able to get some sort of semblance of normalcy? Will they have the basic services? Will they have control over their own oil resources and turn into a diversified economy or a petrostate? Or will Iraq be a battleground between Saudi Arabia and Iran? I mean, those are all real potential consequences, and it will affect the entire world.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us and for offering your insight today, and we hope to see you again in the future.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Anytime.
Thank you.